I gotta put this out there that one of my favorite aspects of this sort of segment, shall we say, of YouTube, of those of us who are in our 40s, 50s, and plus, making content like this where we're a talking head, offering insight. Um, Sometimes the insights overlap and hit you right when you kind of might need them yourself, from somebody you could consider a peer. And it's funny because the discussion of dating and things like that post long-term marriage came up in a video that I saw. I watched it last night and I was like, oh my God, yeah, that's an interesting topic to consider, because people, here on YouTube and elsewhere on the internet, have asked me about that sort of thing and how I might feel about dating them sometimes. And it's an awkward situation to find yourself in on the receiving end. And anyway, in this video, he was talking about how there's these kind of three ways that people sometimes go when their long-term relationship, marriage, common law, situation comes to an end. They will, panic and be just a disaster area and looking to fill that void. And thus they get on the apps and, start looking. And they're looking real hard. And then there's the person they find, or people that they find, and they want to take care of them and, kind of fix that person and thus fix themselves. That seems to be the way that goes. And oh, I have a phone call. Excellent. Okay, that was some real life that just happened there. So what was I saying? I was saying that there are these stages that, or archetypes perhaps, that some of us fall into after a long-term relationship. And I think in my experience, I'm just looking down at my notes. I'm not looking away like a weirdo, I promise. In my case, there was, I think, a bit of all of it, except a lot of it happened, before I left married life. It was like going through a process of kind of untangling, if you want. So there was a lot of deep, lonely, desperate kind of feelings at first, even though I was still with someone. I was incredibly lonely, and, at a time I thought, this is salvageable. I can, give and reach out more than I did before, and that might encourage him to want to do the same with me, and we could find our friendship again, and we can kind of rebuild from that. So there was a sense of that, and that, led to the realization, oh, this isn't going to happen. No. And then you go through the loneliness and the feeling deeply sad and empty, even though you might still be in the same living space, which is what happened with me. And of course, yeah, there's the dating, the wanting to be on the apps and all of that, not because you really want to date, but because you are suddenly, your lifestyle is completely changed because you don't have a life partner anymore to take that part of your life, like to share things with and stuff. Like, that's suddenly not there. And if that's been there for, over a decade, let's say, or more, it's super weird to not have it. I know, because I was married for 17 years, but we lived together before that. We lived together for 20 years. So to suddenly not be in a place where it's not just me living was super weird. Also, I got married pretty early, so I didn't spend much of my life as a single young person. I wasn't single for very long, and I didn't live alone very long at all. Right now, this is the longest I've lived on my own as an independent person, and it's been 18 months. So, you know, there's that. But then there's the other stage that he called the glow up stage. And to me, this feels like the kind of third place, the place where you want to get to, because you are away from having another person to be accountable to the way you need to be in a relationship, because you don't have to consider their needs or what they want or anything like that. You only have your own needs and your own wants to meet. It allows you to sit back and go, well, what do I want? Because so many of us, because of the way we're taught and the way we're programmed about romantic love, we use romantic love to somehow, we think, this is what we think, it doesn't work, but we really feel and believe that it does. We really think that another person in our lives is supposed to help us discover and love who we are. When in all truth, it doesn't work that way. We usually put all our focus outward on that other person, and then we completely lose ourselves, completely, in that scenario. I was just talking with somebody about that kind of stuff, and I said, like, that's why after 20 years with the same person, you don't know them, and you don't know who you are anymore. You kind of forgot, because you learned to prioritize them and their needs. Kind of, a lot of us anyway, do put their needs above and beyond our own, so much so that we forget what our own needs even are. And the luxury of being on your own and not actively dating anybody or pursuing any kind of a long-term relationship or anything is that you have the time you want and need and the freedom to do what you need to do at any given moment to help yourself out in that quest of becoming reacquainted with old hobbies that you might have stopped doing because you hooked up with somebody at one point and, just kind of drifted away from that, right? Like, things like that can happen when you don't have somebody else there who you feel compelled to lavish your attention on rather than your own needs. And obviously, I'm not saying that you shouldn't lavish your attention on somebody that you love, especially in a romantic situation. Of course. But that often causes us to stop lavishing attention on our own selves, and we just forget who we are, and what we need and what we even like. It happens more often than not. And when you get to this glow up kind of thing, that's what you've been doing for a while. You've been considering, well, what do I want out of life? What do I like to do? Where would I like to be in 5 or 10 years? When there's no spouse in the picture, you can kind of, with more ease and more freedom, think about those things with a completely open mind. And suddenly there are opportunities that make themselves known to you that they wouldn't have been so obvious when you were in a relationship, whether it was a long-term one or not, right? Like, so when people ask me, because I have been single for 18 months, when they ask me about, am I on any of the apps and am I interested? I've even had, you know, yeah, just men just flat out ask me, why are you single? You don't need to be single, you know? And it's just kind of like, well, people are allowed to choose. And in my own individual case, which is the only case I can speak of, I've had more happiness, more fulfillment, and just generally more satisfaction with my quality of life as a single person than I did before. And that's not talking my ex-husband down in any way at all. When we were together, we were doing what society told us to do in that situation. So we can't be angry about that. That's just the way of it. And that's okay. I accept and understand from having been through this independent stage, I've been able to look back on things and go, oh, that's why we did that. Right. But I don't understand with the ego in the way telling me to be mad about it. Right. I know a lot of us, you know, who leave relationships, you know, after a time, there's a tendency to trash talk, and that's because the ego is still in there, trying to soothe us. That's what it likes to do. It likes to point the finger and make everybody wrong in order to feel right. And I'm not saying that to sound like I'm looking down at anybody or whatever. We all have feelings. We're all human beings. But that's what time and space helps with, is that perspective and your ability to look at the way you were living before, which might have been in a lot more emotional kind of a place, which is totally human. But you've moved out of that and are now at a higher perspective and able to see things more clearly for what they really are, rather than all the emotional gobbledygook that gets attached to certain life events. You're able to be an observer rather than the reactor, the feelinger, the one who feels, right? You observe the feelings. I hope that makes some kind of sense, but it's through all that, you know, eventually, yeah, you start noticing you don't want to eat the same food anymore. If you're me, you want to get new clothes and you want to wear your hair differently and you want to maybe play with your makeup a little bit in a different way, things like that. And, you know, lo and behold, start losing weight and you start feeling better because you've lost some weight now, and you can do more with your life because you've lost some weight, so you can actually, like, if you're me, you can stand for more than 5 minutes. I could not. For about a decade, I couldn't stand for more than 5 minutes without needing to fall over, because that's what it's like for some of us when we are heavy. So when you're like that, you can't be going on walks. You can't be riding a bike. You can barely sit in a car because the seats are too small. You can barely get a seatbelt on you. Nothing is enjoyable, you know, when you're in that kind of a situation. So once that weight gets lifted, all of a sudden you start to learn things and you start to see, oh, I don't mind walking. I actually like it. Or running, maybe, if that's your thing. And oh, cool, I could go skiing if I wanted to. That's cool. I could, you know, in the summertime, go and rent a canoe and paddle a canoe, you know, on the lake if I felt like it. I couldn't have done those things before when I was in my old way of life, my old way of being. And I think that's why it's so important in my life anyway, to not be on dating apps and to just not be concerned about that kind of stuff, because if I'm at a place with it where if I'm meant to find that kind of a relationship with somebody, then I will. What is meant for us always finds us, and that's true of everything, not just a relationship. So the best way that I can demonstrate that faith really is to not be actively pursuing it. That's sort of what it's like for me. And I know that that's hard for some of us, because we're at a different place, and that's okay. I'm not sitting here saying, well, I have all the answers or something, because I don't, and that's not what I mean. But if you are, in that place where, all you can do is be in a fetal position in your bed because you're that upset, that's okay. I've been there too. The only thing that I would say about it really is that depending where you are in that experience, the most important thing to know would be it does pass. It does. It doesn't feel like it. It feels like it's never going to go away, and you're just going to feel like a shell of a person forever and ever. And I know that place well. I absolutely know that place well. What is most important in that place is to remember that you're not as powerless as you think you might be. You are still capable and able to choose hope, because it's that hope that allows you to kind of dig your way out rather than to keep sinking down. You can kind of grab hold of something and catch yourself before you fall any further than you already have. And then you can kind of slowly but surely start making your way out. But again, I fully and thoroughly am saturated with understanding about how naive and stupid something like that sounds. If somebody had told me that when I was in that position, I'd have flipped them the bird and been like, GFY, man, you don't understand any of this, obviously. That would have been my response. So I appreciate how stupid it sounds. But I hope that if you're here and you're still watching all this, that you that you aren't in a place like that, because that's the worst of the places. Obviously, if you are on apps and you're really, looking for that fulfillment, that external kind of fulfillment, there's lessons that still need to be learned. And that's okay. None of us knows everything. None of us has all the answers. There's no such thing as, being, beyond whatever, like we're all just human. So it just means that there's yet more to be learned from that process. And when it has been learned, it'll stop happening. You won't draw those people to you anymore. You won't be so actively searching that out either, because what is meant for you finds you. So, and eventually you will, start to feel better, look better, act better, because you're feeling better. I know that's my story. I felt miserable, so I acted miserable. When I started to feel better, I started to look better, and I started to act better. And I'm not special for that. That can happen to anybody else too. I know that. So, that being said, dating is a tricky area, and is made more complicated by the world we're living in. And there's a lot of a lot of information out there, some of it good, some of it not good, and that's its own area that I need not venture into now. But just use the time, instead of looking outwardly for another person, use the time instead to like as a gift rather than a curse or some sort of burden. If you treat it like a luxury, like a gift, all of a sudden luxury and gifts are bestowed upon you. And that's how it is. That's how it works. That's why when a lot of people talk about it, right? They met somebody, like they meet their spouse, you know, when they weren't looking, when they weren't thinking about it. That's when they happen to meet this person. It happens all the time. And that's why. It's because they were in that space of not being concerned about it. So, you know, if that's resonant with you, I hope it makes sense, and I hope that it helps if there's any kind of a struggle for you with it. But that's sort of why, you know, I am the way I am about it. And that's why it's easier for me when I do get offers and propositions and things like that. It's a little easier for me to you know, I'm always thankful for it, but at the same time I'm not I'm just not in that kind of a place. I've gotten used to doing things my way. I like leaving my towel there by the sink. That's where it goes. If I had somebody else in my life, I would have to consider not doing that. I don't always have to clean out my sink. You know, I know these are silly examples, but these are the things, right? And after a time, you get used to and actually quite enjoy your own space. And just knowing, for me, I love knowing that I'm going to leave this apartment in a few minutes to go to my job, and nothing is going to change in here because nobody else lives here. And when I come back after my shift is over, I don't need to worry about anybody else being here because there won't be anybody here. And I can proceed to, because it'll be 3:30 or so in the morning when I get here later, I don't need to worry about making too much noise to bother anybody who might be sleeping in here because nobody's here sleeping. I can turn the lights on as I need to. I can, you know, do all these things to just deal with my own life and not need to be an inconvenience. And I like that. I really get a lot out of that. So that's what I'll leave us with. I could go on and on forever, but I won't. If you're still here, you're fantastic. I hope to make more kind of content maybe around the relationship side of things. Maybe that could be interesting. Let me know if that's of interest, and I can kind of maybe talk a little more about it if you wish. Subscription button, as per usual, and there's a video down there you can go ahead and click on. It means a lot when you do that. Also, if you subscribe, turning on notifications really helps. Hitting the bell, as they say, that makes a big difference. Liking videos too really helps, and comments too. So I thank you so much, and I will see you very soon.